Well, this job never gets boring, at least when it comes to the AFC North. And this week was a very interesting week of AFC North football. This is Quincy Carrier here for your Monday AFC North recap, where I just briefly go over what happened, give my thoughts about it, and tell you where I think all the teams are in the AFC North. Let's start with the Cleveland Browns. It's obvious they need to bench their quarterback. The question is, can they bench their quarterback? I talked about this on my channel. Make sure you go subscribe there at Quincy Carrier. But I talked about this on my channel, and benching Deshaun Watson is not as simple as just benching a regular player. You want to bench Deshaun Watson, you're effectively ending the Deshaun Watson era in Cleveland. Now, again, a lot of people aren't opposed to that in the fan base, but you got to think about what ownership has put into this, right? $230 million. They still have that money guaranteed on the books. You would basically be saying, hey, any chance of being able to recoup that money, we're just going to let it go, right? You're just going to eat that $100+ million that you've already paid, well, that you still got to pay, that he hasn't even played through yet. You also got to consider for Andrew Berry, it's lost cause when it comes to the draft picks. And then Kevin Stefanski, 3 years of trying to build this offense around Deshaun Watson. So it's a lot of time that they've put in here. There's a lot of resources that this team has spent on trying to make this Deshaun Watson thing happen. And the question is, are they at the point to where they're willing to accept their own losses here, right? The time that they spent, the draft picks that they spent, the money that they've spent, the resources that each of these three parties have put in, because I think all three of these parties are equally responsible for Deshaun Watson being here. They'll be equally responsible for Deshaun Watson getting benched. Are they willing to call it a day on this Deshaun Watson experiment? I think there's no reason why they shouldn't get to that point. They should be there. Only thing I could see that's stopping them is pride, right? Not wanting to admit that you're wrong, not wanting to open yourself to the criticism fully that you made one of the worst trades in NFL history with Deshaun. Like, it is what it is. I think it's time to accept the L. There's nothing productive. There's nothing that you could build off of on how Deshaun has performed 3 out of these 5 games. And at this point, it's started to become a drag on the rest of the locker room. I don't think anybody believes in what the Browns are doing as long as Deshaun's out there at quarterback. And at some point, these three have to read the room and make the decision that needs to happen, right? Like, Deshaun just can't play the rest of the season. There's no way that this locker room survives that. It's like, do you want to really... You're already pushing it, right, on destroying a lot of the goodwill that you had in that locker room after last year. You could really end up destroying it over trying to make this whole Deshaun Watson thing work. Or even worse, like, we could see the one stable regime the Cleveland Browns have had in 20 years with Andrew Berry, Kevin Stefanski, get destroyed because they still want to make this Watson thing work. I think it's done. We've seen 17 games of this experiment, and games like we saw last week aren't necessarily the outliers, right? The good games seem to be the outliers after a 17-game sample. I have no reason to advocate for him to start anymore. I don't think anybody really has any reason to advocate for him to start anymore. I think at least 95% of the fan base has turned on him. The 5% that hasn't is just being polite, and there's maybe 1% of people who are Watson diehards, but I don't think those people are even going to stick with it if Jameis goes out there. So, yeah. It's time for the Browns to bench their quarterback. We can talk about the defense. We can talk about every other problem the Browns have, but like, until you fix the stench going on at the quarterback position, fixing those problems, it's pointless. It's a pointless endeavor. This team can't score more than 10 points. This team sucks right now offensively, and it's becoming a drag on the entire unit. And I'm not saying benching Watson will make the team a Super Bowl contender or anything like that, but it will at least get that dark cloud over from the Cleveland Browns franchise right now, which is Deshaun Watson. The next team I want to talk about is the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, I got a lot of flack for how I predicted this game to turn out on AFC North Talk. I ended up being 100% correct on this, right? I thought people were giving the Steelers offense way too much credit for what was essentially a comeback late in the game that they didn't complete versus a bad Indianapolis Colts team. I thought people just assumed that the Steelers offense would be able to steamroll a weakened Cowboys defense. But I think in that process, we all forgot that the Steelers offense has problems. And it seems like they're going through their annual George Pickens drama, right? Which usually figures itself out eventually. It also seems like they're legitimately going to play Russell Wilson next week, which, like, I don't think Justin Fields played great in this game, but I don't think I would want to go back to Russell Wilson if I'm Pittsburgh. But it seems like that's what they're about to do. They're going to try this whole Russell Wilson thing out. So we'll see how that goes for Pittsburgh. But the thing that I'd be more concerned about if I were the Steelers is this defense did not perform well at all. I mean, if it weren't for Dak Prescott possibly being the worst red zone quarterback of the week, you would have got blown out by the Dallas Cowboys. Like, the Dallas Cowboys got to the red zone, I think, 5 times in this game. 2 of them, they turned it over. Dak Prescott, just held the ball forever and got strip sacked on one. And then he threw an inexplicable interception on the other one. So you're talking about 14 points, 6 points at least being left on the board for the Dallas Cowboys. And if that happens, you're really talking about this Steelers defense a lot differently. So I would be a little bit concerned about these defensive performances from the Pittsburgh Steelers the last couple of weeks, because 2 weeks ago, I thought this was the best defense in football. But, now we're seeing Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb tear up this defense, which, I mean, that's fair enough, but they had a lot of offensive line issues in this game, and they had a lot of wide receivers go out. They didn't have Brandon Cooks, and they were able to cook you up there. And the same could be said for last week against Indy with a backup quarterback in Joe Flacco. Now, Joe Flacco might just still have that magic from last year, but still not a good look for Pittsburgh. I mean, you're supposed to be one of the best defenses in football. These 2 performances back to back, pretty concerning here. We'll see what they do at quarterback next week. I think going to Russ would be a big mistake for this team. But, all of a sudden that hot start that the Steelers had, it's starting to fizzle, and it's starting to get back to reality here. Look, the Steelers are going to be a good team at least. They're going to be over 500. They're going to be in playoff contention by the end of the year. The question is how they're going to get there. But, yeah, the dream of the Steelers being the Super Bowl contender that some people had after that 3-0 start starting to feel more like a dream and less like reality. And let's talk about this Baltimore-Cincinnati game. I have concerns about both of these defenses. Like, Cincinnati's defense did not play well in this game, but you kind of just didn't expect Cincinnati's defense to play well. They've not been good all year. That is what it is. Joe Burrow was fine in this game for the most part. Cincinnati and Cleveland are both 1-4 right now, and I don't know which one is more concerning of a 1-4, because the Browns are 1-4 in large part because their quarterback stinks. You can at least identify the root of the Cleveland Browns issues. The Bengals quarterback doesn't stink, and that defense shouldn't be that bad. They're worse than they were last year, and they spent a lot of the offseason trying to fix the defense. It doesn't make sense that they have been this bad defensively, and we talk about this all the time on AFC North Talk. People get it wrong with the Bengals all the time. People think the Bengals offense is what carries the show there in Cincinnati when they went to those back-to-back conference championship games. But what really carried the show was their defense. Now, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase were able to make the plays when they needed to make them, but the defense was what helped them get to the Super Bowl and get to the conference championship game. That defense is not there. Now, the offense, I do think, has gotten better over the last couple of weeks than it's ever been in Cincinnati, but it's clearly not enough to get over the hump of some of these good teams. And now, Cincinnati's looking 1-4. And they have a franchise quarterback, and they are relatively healthy. And it's well, if this is what you are through 5 games with all of those factors included, maybe this is just what the Bengals are going to be this year. I don't know. They're going to win more games. They're probably going to get 9 wins at least this year, but I would be concerned there. Look, Cleveland's 1-4 is going to be more costly because I don't believe that they have it in them right now to be able to make a rally, especially if they keep Deshaun Watson out there. So we'll see what happens here with both of those teams. But yeah, the 1-4 for the Bengals, I really didn't expect that. I thought they would win this week. The Ravens, on the other hand, I have one thing that I am like, okay, this dude is the best player at his position in the NFL. And another thing where I'm like, hey, I know. Now let's talk about the Ravens. One, I think Lamar Jackson is right now the front runner to win MVP. I don't see how that's not the case. When I watched him play, I'm like, yeah, that's the MVP. He might get his third MVP. He's playing excellent football. Derrick Henry's numbers look fine in the box score, but I think he got 51 of those yards of his 93 at the end of the game. Like, he really wasn't a factor play to play in this game as much as you would think, but it was Lamar, man. Lamar was running for his life, making all kind of plays back there, finding guys on outlets. Like, that last play to Isaiah Likely was insane. Lamar is currently the MVP. The only concern I would have for the Ravens is, like, this defense isn't what you guys thought it would be, right? It's not a repeat of last year. The points allowed thing is starting to become a real problem. And look, I know I'll be trolling about Roquan Smith sometimes, but I'm dead serious. Watch the tape on this one. Watch number 0. And tell me if teams fear that guy anymore. I saw a Bengals team that didn't even fear Roquan Smith, but actively invited attacking Roquan Smith. Like, there was a drive, I think the third scoring drive or the second scoring drive of the day for the Cincinnati Bengals. A whole drive, they were just attacking Roquan Smith in the run game and in the pass game. And then you look at that big screen touchdown that Jamar Chase had, and who was late to make the tackle was Roquan Smith. Like, at some point, we do have to have a serious conversation about, hey, man, Roquan Smith might not be good or as good as people think he is. Like, I know I'm the one who beats the drum for the Roquan Smith overrated thing, but like the evidence has never been more tangible than it is right now about Roquan Smith. And you can hide it behind, well, he's really here for leadership and he's here to do this and that. But like, look at the stuff that he's tasked to do, and then look at his success rate on that stuff. It's not great. That's the only thing with the Ravens, right? But they have the MVP right now at quarterback, and they can survive a sloppy game from their defense on the road because Lamar Jackson is simply that good at football. So, hey, some good, some bad, right, for Baltimore. But Baltimore looks like the front runner to win this division right now, and Lamar Jackson looks like the front runner to win the MVP. That's my thoughts about the AFC North. Peace.